No, it's not bad enough that Job's friends each took a turn to verbally abuse and discourage him, attack him, his character, his integrity. But now they make one final circle around him, each taking jabs for one last time before Elihu chimes in. But Job still has the hope in a Redeemer to come. So that is next on the Wounds of the Faithful podcast.
Welcome to the Wounds of the Faithful podcast, brought to you by DSW Ministries. Your host is singer, songwriter, speaker, and domestic violence advocate Diana Winkler. She is passionate about helping survivors in the church heal from domestic violence and abuse and trauma. This podcast is not a substitute for professional counseling or qualified medical help. Now, here is Diana.
Hey folks, how are you doing today? Thanks for being here with me. I hope that you've survived the holidays. I know that it was difficult for some of you. And again, that's okay if you didn't participate in all of the festivities that the season had to offer. So I wanted to remind you that we do have a private Facebook group for those of you listening on the podcast. And it is called the Wounds of the Faithful podcast group. So go ahead and search on Facebook and join in. We're just getting started. I'm posting stuff there on a regular basis, trying my best with my crazy, very full schedule. I'm looking forward to talking with you about things that you're interested in. So there's that. I thought I was on Elihu next, but when I was studying, I realized there was one more round with each of the friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, attacking him once again. The speeches are much shorter, but they are nasty. And he answers each one of them when they attack him. So I didn't want to leave that out because I felt that it was important to show Job definitely knows where we're coming from. He has been abused quite badly. He's at the end of his rope right now, but you will see that even though he's back and forth with his emotions, a roller coaster ride, as we've said in the past, he's still holding on to his integrity, his faith in the Lord. So we are going to start, let's see, we're in chapter 15, and there isn't any introductions for these three because we've already met them, but I'm not going to read every single verse because there's a lot here, and I only have 30 minutes. I don't want to go over the 30 minutes. I'm going to just take the bits and pieces that I think are relevant for us, that I think are important, and we'll talk about those things because I really want to get to the good stuff. Now, if I was doing the 60-minute version of the podcast, then we would be further along here, but so next week will be Elihu, and then we have God coming to speak to Job and his friends from out of the whirlwind. That is the finale. So, but we have to get through the hard stuff first before we get to the good stuff, the exciting stuff. So yeah, here's how it starts out. It doesn't start out any different than the other speeches that these friends do. Eliphaz, of course, speaks first, and he just opens up with, "Should a wise man answer with empty knowledge and fill himself with the east wind? Should he reason with unprofitable talk, or by speeches with which he can do no good?" So this is very coarse right now, as you can tell. Apparently, Job's speeches to him are an excretion of belly wind. I read that in Anderson's commentary. You can interpret that any way you want. Gas, burps, I don't know. But it's intended to be an insult. And they have said this back and forth to each other before, if you've listened to the previous episodes. And I have to mention, if you have not listened to the previous episodes, unless you're very familiar with Job, please go back and do that because you will be lost as to where we are. Okay, so he goes on to say, "Are you the first man who was born, or were you made before the hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not in us? Both the gray-haired and the ages are among us, much older than your father." Ooh, trying to put Job into his place there. We mentioned that the friends speak in the order of age, the oldest going first. So these friends of his are much older than Job. Job is around 70 years old. And so apparently Eliphaz is older than his father. So that would give him 20 more years, I would say, wouldn't you? So Eliphaz is accusing Job of a lack of understanding. Eliphaz groups Job with sinful people, deserving of being judged by God. Hey, suffering is only given to the wicked. God only judges the wicked people. So, as we've talked about before, we all know that isn't always the truth. There are really wicked people that we know in our life that get away with stuff, that don't seem to be suffering any consequences or any judgment at all. They just get away with things. So let's go with chapter 16. This is Job's response. Miserable comforters are you. He just lets him have it here. Job answered and said, I have heard many things. I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. Shall words of wind have an end? Say he's using the same insults as they are. Or what provokes you that you answer? I also do speak as you do. If your soul were in my soul's place, I could heap up words against you and shake my head at you. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the comfort of my lips would relieve your grief. So Job's pointing out, hey, you could be in my shoes right now, but, suffering can change people. Suffering has changed his perspective. And Job is stating that, hey, I would strengthen and comfort you if you were in my shoes. And going through these trials and suffering, whatever it is, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? Nobody volunteers for that. But it does make us more empathetic to those of us around us that are suffering. I am very empathetic and sympathetic to people who have been divorced because I've been divorced. I had an abusive husband. I had been abused by the church. And it was before, when I was still married to my abuser, in denial of what he was doing. I was very judgmental about other divorced people. Well, you didn't try hard enough. You can't get divorced. It's against the Bible. You can't be as spiritual as me because you're divorced. And I've had to ask forgiveness from God and from people that I have directed that towards, because when it was my turn, and yes, I chose to divorce, which made it worse because my ex-husband did not leave me. I left him. People did not understand why. You don't understand what it's like to go through an abusive relationship. It's hard to explain it to people outside. They're very judgy. That's human nature. So yes, I have a different perspective now. That's why I have this podcast. That's why I have the ministry, others that have gone through this. So let's read verses 6-14. Though I speak, my grief is not relieved. And if I remain silent, how am I eased? But now he has worn me out. You have made desolate all of my company. You have shriveled me up, and it is a witness against me. My leanness rises up against me and bears witness to my face. He tears me in his wrath and hates me. They gape at me with their mouth. They strike me reproachfully on the cheek. They gather together against me. God has delivered me to the ungodly and turned me over to the hands of the wicked. So there's a lot in this passage. He's talking about the people that are around him. Maybe there are people that are walking by this trash heap he's sitting on with his 3 friends, just beating up on him. There are people that have hit him. I never noticed that before, but he has been the recipient of physical abuse. So all the people around him are judging him. He is very, very thin right now. You can see the gauntness in his face now. He is utterly worn out. Nobody knew what his struggle was between him and God Almighty. So when he's talking about recalling the attacks of the ungodly, Job is talking about remembering the cruel attacks of the Chaldeans and the Sabaeans that came upon his servants and his livestock back in chapter 1. So let's see here. Verses 15-17, Job is wondering, why did I deserve this dark trial that I'm going through? Because I've been righteous all of this time. I have sewn sackcloth over my skin and laid my head in the dust. My face is flushed from weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. Though no violence is in my hands, and my prayer is pure. So again, he's talking about his appearance. This is what it looks like to mourn. They wear sackcloth when they mourn, back in the day. Today we wear black, usually. He has been crying. He's got bags under his eyes, dark under his eyes. We know what that looks like. He is stating, I haven't killed anybody. I haven't punched anybody. And as far as I know, my prayers to God are pure and innocent. Job even talks about the creation of the world. He believes he has a righteous witness in heaven that would defend him, that would get him off the hook with these friends of his. My friends scorn me, and my eyes pour out tears to God. That just breaks my heart, doesn't it? I just want to go there and be a comfort to him. Anybody that is in this state. I work at a hospital, and I was walking in one of the many gardens that the hospital has that you could walk around, and they have benches you can sit at. And I walked into the entrance of this one garden, and I heard somebody crying. I turned around and I saw this woman weeping on a bench there. And I just felt so bad for her. I just ran up to her and I said, are you okay? There's something I can do for you? Do you need some Kleenex? And I sat down next to her and I said, you have somebody in the hospital, don't you? She says yes. And she told me about her family. So just sat and listened. And she just so appreciated me taking time out of my lunch break to talk with her. So I could not have walked past that woman with her crying. And a lot of us think, well, it's none of my business. I don't want to butt into somebody's business. I don't want to make somebody uncomfortable. Like I said in previous episodes, you don't have to say anything you don't want. You can sit there and just listen, hand her a tissue. It's going to be okay. Is there anything I can do for you? So let's go on to chapter 17. Again, I'm not going through everything here because I can't. I want to be able to get through everything. Chapter 17, Job is complaining to heaven and he's complaining to those around him. He's begging God at this point. So in verses 3 to 5, Job is begging God, anybody up there in the heavens that could help him. In verses 6 through 9, Job is explaining his present condition and he knows that there is a resolution and he is trusting in that resolution that's going to come someday. Verses 10 through 16, we're back to Job's sense of hopelessness. But please come back again, all of you, for I shall not find one wise man among you. Ooh, those are harsh words, aren't they? He's speaking from a place of pain. Chapter 18 is where Bildad objects to what he says. How long until you put an end to words, gain understanding, and afterwards we will speak? Why are we counted as beasts and regarded as stupid in your sight? Haha. Now he figured it out. You're calling us stupid, aren't you? So Bildad talks about in verses 5 through 6, the dark life of the wicked. In verses 7 through 10, the dangerous path of the wicked. Verses 11 through 16, and then the miserable life of the wicked. So verses 5 through 16, you've got the dark life, the dangerous path, and the miserable life of the wicked. You can read that on your own because it's nothing we haven't heard before so far. But he says, it devours patches of skin. The firstborn of death devours his limbs. So he's stating that, hey, only the wicked have problems with their skin. That means, Job, you are among the wicked. Boy, that is a real punch in the face. That is, I think back in that day, they didn't even have calamine lotion or Benadryl, allergy pills, diaper rash cream. They didn't have anything for the skin, really. They didn't have modern medicine. So to say that only the wicked have skin problems, that's really hitting below the belt. You're grasping for straws here, buddy. And then Bildad goes on in verses 17 through 21. Here's the destiny of sinful people, Job. It's pretty sad. This is the place of him. This is the place of him who does not know God. Bildad is attacking him some more. Not only is Job sinful and apparently wicked, he also doesn't know God. Obviously, he knows God. That he was known in his city, all over the region, for being a godly man, and now all of a sudden he doesn't know God. Ooh, wow, this is very cruel and obviously false. Somebody who is blameless and upright. Job chapter 1, verse 1. He was a man who was blameless and upright and one who feared God and shunned evil. How does Job respond? And I really wanted to get to chapter 19 because it's a very important chapter. So the theme of this chapter is, I know that my Redeemer lives. Verses 1 through 6. Job complains that his friends have not understood him at all. Job answered and said, how long will you torment my soul and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have reproached me. You are not ashamed that you have wronged me. And then if indeed I have erred, my error remains with me. If indeed you exalt yourselves against me and plead my disgrace against me, know then that God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net. So we might say today, those of us who are listening, many of us see the church today as unloving, just like Job's friends were. So verses 13 through 20, he's back on the roller coaster ride. Job is describing that God's attacking him. He has removed my brothers far from me, and my acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have failed. My close friends have forgotten me. Those who dwell in my house and my maidservants, they count me as a stranger. I'm an alien in their sight. I call my servant, but he gives no answer. I beg him with my mouth. My breath is offensive to my wife, and I am repulsive to the children of my own body. Even young children despise me. I arise, and they speak against me. All of my close friends abhor me, and those who I love have turned against me. My bone clings to my skin and to my flesh, and I've escaped by the skin of my teeth. There's a lot here I'm going to explain. So we know that his wife didn't want anything to do with him back in Job chapter 2, verse 9. Now it mentions the children in these verses. There are a couple thoughts, a couple options that could be here. Some of the commentaries state that these must either be grandchildren or those who are symbolically Job's children. Those of us who have been in the faith for a long time, we have what we call spiritual children, people that we've mentored in the faith. And we call them our spiritual children. Another view is it may also be that Job had in mind that his children cursed or rejected him from the world beyond. He felt that from their place in the life after, they regarded him as repulsive. The corruption of his inwards, besides his ulcers, made his breath strong and unwholesome. That is from Trapp, his commentary. Here, with his condition, his body, he's very close to physical death, apparently. Obviously, his description, his bones are sticking through. His skin is cleaving to his bones. The phrase, by the skin of my teeth, we say that a lot, don't we? Where does that come from? It comes from the book of Job. Actually, a lot of phrases that we say originate from the Bible. So Spurgeon, and you can tell that, like, to quote Spurgeon, there is no skin upon the teeth, or scarcely any. Therefore, Job means that there was next to nothing of him left, like the skin of his teeth. The King James Version makes a literal translation of it, and therefore created an idiom in the English language for a narrow escape by the skin of my teeth. That is from Smick commentary. Job has nothing left of him but the instrument of speech. The devil purposely meddled, not with his hoping that he would curse God. These lips are going to curse God eventually. That's what Satan thinks. Okay, so Job proclaims his trust in God as Redeemer and Judge. So in verses 21 to 22, he's asking for some pity here. Have pity on me. Have pity on me. You, oh my friends. 23 through 29. There's a very important few verses here. Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book, that they were engraved on a rock with an iron pen and lead forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at the last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself. So those of you who are not familiar with Job, he is considered a prophet. And what is a prophet? Someone who not only tells the truth about God, but tells of the future. And this is what we would call a messianic prophecy. And if you're reading the King James Version, then you would see that this is a song. This is from Handel's Messiah. You can go on YouTube or Spotify and look up Handel's Messiah. I know my Redeemer liveth. Steve Green has a really great modern version of this song that I recommend. A traditional version, I would recommend Kathleen Battle. Check that out. I have not recorded the song yet officially. I've sang this many times, but I've never recorded it. Maybe next year I might do that. The word Redeemer, the original word for Redeemer is Goel, which stood for another to defend his cause, to avenge wrongs done to him, and to acquit him of all of his charges laid against him. That is from Morgan's commentary. So this is very relevant to this passage. It has both a criminal and a civil aspect. And it talks about that Job wasn't seeking revenge, but he was seeking justice. So the Redeemer is the champion of the oppressed. So that is commentary by Smick. The words, for I know, Job is very certain of this. Even through all that he's gone through, he knew he had a Redeemer. Someone was going to rescue him eventually from this horrible, horrible time against all of these accusations. In verses 25 through 27, there's no doubt that the Redeemer we're talking about here is God. That's the only one who could be. That's what Anderson's commentary would say. He goes on to say, Job cannot understand why God is now acting so completely out of character with what he has always believed. He must somehow recover his friendship by God by means which supersede the theological calculus of his friends. He boldly claims God as his nearest relative. Wow, I love that. His Redeemer is alive, of course. He is somebody that can bring life to Job. God is not going to hide forever, because he states, in my flesh I shall see God. So Spurgeon says once again, this would be the moment of Job's comfort, restoration, and vindication. It has occurred to me that possibly Job himself may not have known the full meaning of all that he said. Imagine the patriarch driven into a corner, badgered by his so-called friends, charged by them with all manner of evils, until he is quite boiling over with indignation, and at the same time smarting under terrible bodily diseases and the dreadful losses which he has sustained. And at last he bursts out with his exclamation, I shall be vindicated one day. I am sure I shall. I know that my vindicator liveth. I am sure that there is one who will vindicate me. And if he never clears my name and reputation as long as I live, it will be done afterwards. There must be a just God in heaven who will see me righted. And even though worms devour my body until the last relic of it has passed away, I do verily believe that somehow in the far off ages I shall be vindicated. Those are wise words, Mr. Spurgeon, who has been gone for quite some time now. Nevertheless, it is also significant that in this passage where Jesus is wonderfully celebrated as a living redeemer and vindicator and kinsman for his people, we also see the shadow of the suffering of Jesus. Job's language in chapter 19 is full of haunting premonitions of Christ's crucifixion. And this is from Mason's commentary. Yeah, this is describing almost Jesus' crucifixion. God surrounded me with his net, set darkness in my paths. He stripped me of my glory. He breaks down on every side, and I am done. He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me as one of his enemies. He has removed my brothers far from me. My close friends have forgotten me. Those who I love have turned against me. My bone clings to my skin and to my flesh. You can go read Jesus' account of his crucifixion, and this describes those things very closely. Let's get to chapter 20. You can Google messianic prophecies, and it will list all of the prophecies concerning Jesus that were mentioned in the Old Testament. Most of you with a Bible have them in the back of your Bible somewhere. So here we go. Chapter 20, Zophar, his round two. Zophar describes his personal turmoil. Apparently, Job's speech made him upset. He is ashamed of Job and his poor attitude. Zophar doesn't really mention anything of what he said up to this point. Zophar thinks that what he has spewed out is infallible. In verses 12 through 19, he talks about a cobra. It becomes cobra venom within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. The viper's tongue will slay him. And of course, Job has to respond to that in chapter 21. The problem is that the wicked prosper here so far. Job says, "You're not listening to me. You're speaking with sharp, sarcastic words to me. Well, I'm going to speak sarcastically back to you." Verses 4 through 16. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. Their houses are safe from fear. Neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure. Their cow calves without miscarriage. They spend their days in wealth. Yet they say to God, "Depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways." Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? So we all know this. We've got people out there that don't care anything about God, yet they seem to be very successful. Like they're very disrespectful towards God and his people. 17 through 21. Hey, God allows the wicked to prosper. Verses 22 to 20, he talks about sometimes the godly suffer and sometimes the wicked prosper and the godly sometimes suffer, and then vice versa. One dies in his full strength, another man dies in the bitterness of his soul. They lie down alike in the dust. So he's agonizing because he sees both. Sometimes, the godly do prosper, sometimes the wicked prosper. So this is agonizing for him. Verses 27 through 34, he's challenging his friends once again. Look, I know your thoughts and the schemes with which you would wrong me. How then can you comfort me with empty words, since falsehood remains in your answers? He's calling him out for sure. So Job 22 begins a third and shortened round of debate between Job and his three friends. So like the first cycle, they were just talking in general terms. The second round, it's mainly the fate of the wicked in Job's point of view, that it goes against what his friends' beliefs are. So now it comes into the open and the breach between them is huge. They are pretty much enemies now. The discussion grinds to a halt. Okay. So we go through one more round just so you can't take this anymore. I know I can't. I don't think I would have lasted this long. So Eliphaz attacks Job again. What good are you to God? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty that you are righteous? Or is it gain to him that you make your way blameless? He's saying he's wicked? Ooh, this is so bad. Verses 4 through 11. Is not your wickedness great and your iniquity without end? For you have taken pledges from your brother for no reason, and have stripped the naked of their clothing. You have not given the weary water to drink. You have withheld bread from the hungry. But the mighty man possessed the land, and the honorable man dwelt in it. You have sent widows away empty, and the strength of the fatherless was crushed. Ooh, these are bold-faced lies, of course. They're making up stuff at this point. He didn't do any of those things. Let me see here. We're in chapter 22. So just going to summarize it from here because we're out of time. So Eliphaz is attacking Job's theology. He's telling Job, hey, you need to get right with God. Okay. Job wants to take his case before God, of course. Really, I'm skimming through these because, again, it seems to be very repetitive. I don't want to be over repetitive, but I'm leaving you some stuff to go and read to fill in these holes. In verses 8 through 9, Job is confessing that he doesn't understand everything about God. He needs divine intervention. He's humble. He's confident in his own integrity in verses 10 through 12. This is a very popular verse. He knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. I know a song about that, but I'm not going to sing it. Let's see. Job acknowledges God's power, God's sovereignty. Nobody can change God. Chapter 24, he says that the wicked oppress weak people. That's no surprise to us, right? But they still get away with stuff. The wicked enjoy darkness. He talks about in verses 18 through 21 what should happen to the ungodly. He said, the worm should feed on him. He should be remembered no more. Yay. So that's just a summary of chapter 24. This just keeps going on with now Bildad is coming in for his final jab cross hook undercut. In chapter 25, Bildad talks about God's greatness. Okay. Man, he compares man to God. Obviously, in verse 4, he says, how can then man be righteous before God? How can he be pure who is born of a woman? And in poetic language, they state the obvious. Obviously, man is born of a woman. He's not born of a donkey. But that's the language of the day is they state the obvious. Talks about creation, the stars, the moon and the stars. The creation of God reflects the glory of God. In chapter 26, Job's response to Bildad, have you helped me or anybody else? Have you helped anybody who is without power? Have you saved the arm that has no strength? He doesn't believe that they've helped anybody in the past. Have you helped anybody with your wisdom? Have you declared sound advice to many? Have you counseled one who has no wisdom? Ooh. So in verses 5 through 13, where Job also talks about the power of God, Job knew the power of God, and he even knew it more perfectly than his friends. That's what Morgan's commentary mentions. Here's an interesting verse in here. He hangs the earth on nothing. So in contrast to ancient mythologies that were around back in Job's day, they believed that the earth was held up by elephants or giant turtles. But Job knew that the earth hangs on nothing. So a little bit of science there for you. There is science in the Bible. Job also understood the principles of the curvature of the earth and the curved nature of the horizon. So that's in Job 26:8, of course. So there's a lot of other stuff in here that we don't have time to go through. The thunder of his power. Who can understand? That's in verse 14. Job 27, he declares his integrity once again. Till I die, I will not put my integrity away from me. I am going to die on this hill, but my lips will not speak wickedness. I'm not going to speak wickedness about God. Talks about in 7 to 10, he talks about hope of the hypocrite. In verses 11 through 12, he rebukes Job's friends. God's going to judge the wicked. I will teach you about the hand of God. Why then will you behave with complete nonsense? Verses 13 through 23, he describes the wicked man once again. Okay, so chapter 28, Job talks a lot about wisdom here. There are treasures in the earth in verses 5 through 11. The value and wisdom comes from God. Verses 12 through 19, true wisdom is very rare. Where can wisdom be found? And does not know its value. It cannot be purchased for gold. It's more precious than any jewels, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. In Proverbs, speaking of a virtuous woman, she is rare as rubies. Verses 20 through 28, wisdom is difficult to come by. You have to search for it with all of your heart, is what the summary is here. To depart from evil is understanding. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. Okay. Job 29. Job is reminiscing about the good old days. He had a great relationship with God. Oh, that I were as in months past, as in days when God watched over me. When my steps were bathed in cream, and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. That's in verse 6. When the Almighty was yet with me. He is still with you. When my children were around me. He's reminiscing about the good old days with people, relationships, friendships. When I went out to the gate by the city. This is verse 7. He's talking about that he was respected when he walked into town. He mentions, I delivered the poor who cried out, the fatherless, and the one who had no helper. The blessing of a perishing man came upon me. I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind. I was feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor. I plucked the victim from the fangs of the wicked's teeth. Young and old, stop talking and listen to him. Verses 18 through 20, Job states he used to have security. Verses 21 through 25, he talks about he had authority. He was a leader within the community. I chose the way for them, and I sat as a chief. I comfort as someone who comforts mourners. Chapter 30, he's comparing it to his current misery. The men who point fingers and laugh and mock him, they have really low character. They're younger than I am. This is verse 1. But now they mock at me, men younger than I, whose fathers I disdain to put with the dogs of my flock. Ooh, ooh. Well, quite further down in verse 8, they were sons of fools. Okay. Verses 9 to 15, Job must stay the course. He must endure. He doesn't have a choice. He has to endure the spiritual, the physical, the emotional misery that he is presently experiencing. That's in verses 16 through 23. He's saying to God, I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. Verse 30, I know that you will bring me to death. So even if he doesn't rescue him from his suffering right now, he's confident at least that God will give him the release of death. Verses 24 through 21, he's stating that this has been an injustice. Nobody deserves this. I'm in this heap of ruins. Him and I wept for him who was in trouble. Has not my soul grieved for the poor? Okay. Oh my gosh. Chapter 31, he is holding to his purity and his innocence. He is giving an oath here in this chapter. And he says, verses 1 through 4, I was never guilty of lust. I've made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? Yeah, he is innocent. He's never looked at the girly magazines. He wasn't looking at porn. He wasn't going to the temple prostitutes. He says in verses 5 through 8, he was never guilty of deceiving anybody, of any falsehoods. Hey, God knows my integrity. Hey, if I have done these things, then let me reap what I sow. He goes on further in verses 9 through 12. Hey, I was never an adulterer. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked by my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. For that would be wickedness. Yes, it would be iniquity deserving of judgment. For that would be a fire that consumes to destruction, and would root out all of my increase. So that's very colorful language, very descriptive. That paints a picture of, hey, if I've been an adulterer, then my wife can be an adulterer, right? Then he would deserve to have his wife taken from him and given to somebody else. Yeah. This is not family friendly, these verses here. He did in verses 13 through 15. He's stating that I have never been cruel to any of my servants. If I have despised the cause of my male or female servant when they complain against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? Right? I've been a good employer. Verses 16 through 23. I have never victimized the poor. I've never taken advantage of the poor. If I have kept the poor from their desire, or caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or eaten my morsel by myself, or that the fatherless could not eat of it, but from my youth I reared him as a father, and from my mother's womb I guided the widow. If I have seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or any poor man without covering, if his heart has not blessed me, and he was not warmed with the fleece of my sheep, if I have raised my hand against the fatherless when I saw I had help in the gate, then let my arm fall from my shoulder, let my arm be torn from the socket. Ooh, I don't even have to explain that. That speaks for itself. Verses 24 through 28, I was never greedy. I never followed false gods. I'm blameless. I've never gloated, I've never rejoiced at the destruction of him who hated me. So in verses 35 through 37, Job demands that God gives him an audience. Here's my mark that the Almighty would answer me. That's pretty bold. So that is crazy. Okay, so I know that was a lot to digest in one episode of 30 minutes. We go back and read these chapters to fill in the blanks, get more detail about what he was talking about, what his friends were talking about. So next week is Elihu. He talks and talks and talks and talks for 4 chapters. And he says he's a different sort of fellow. So I hope that you have gotten some encouragement here, that you learn a couple things, that you are not afraid to talk with God, plead with him. You're not afraid to cry, stand up for yourself against verbal abuse from those that would do that to you. So until next week, thank you for being with me here. God bless you, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Wounds of the Faithful podcast. If this episode has been helpful to you, please hit the subscribe button and tell a friend. You can connect with us at dswministries.org, where you'll find our blog along with our Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel links. Hope to see you next week.